Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to come up here and show you a better way, because we believe in foster children and helping all people. We're going to show you that through three ways: through supporting parental rights, through actually showing you how foster care is actually not the answer, and showing you how we can create a better society through increased social programs and fix this problem. So first, why is parental rights so important? Well, because when government comes in and intervenes and splits up families, right, that are loving, that want the best for their children, they destroy that family. They destroy the basic fabrics of the loving relationship between the father and the child, and mother and the children. And what you have here is a situation that makes it far worse. Now, Esther gets up here and gives you a lot of statistics about how people that are homeless are far more adverse than the general society. But we're going to show you over here that statistically, lower income people in general are obviously at a disadvantage compared to most society, which is upper income or middle income. So we believe that children that just have a home, that still live in the ghetto, as you could call it, or in low-income housing, should have the same opportunity as homeless children when it comes to health care, when it comes to education. And we believe on this side that we can actually get a plan that fixes that. But Cody, go ahead.
Yes, you mentioned that people who live in low-income areas should have access to health care, but aren't there already programs set aside for them that the government subsidizes?
Yeah, but there's also health care opportunities through low income for all people. Not just, you don't go to a health care clinic and they say, oh, you're homeless, so we can't help you. That's not true. That's not how the government works. Now, statistically, as they said, most low income people are at a disadvantage when it comes to educational attainment, or when it comes to health care access. But it's low income students and kids of all ages. So why is splitting up parental rights so important? Well, U.S. Supreme Court has ruled time and time again that parents' rights are very important. When it came to with Prime versus Connecticut and Massachusetts in 1944, they said that parents' rights is most important. So we think that this side is actually infringing on it. Because this side over here says because you live in a van, somehow you love your children less. We don't agree with that, right? Because this side over here says if you don't live in a box in some apartment building, if you don't own land or live in a house on some property, you love your children less. Now, you could still live, as I said, in the ghetto or whatever you want to call it, in some apartment complex, and you could still have the same rights for your children of low attainment, but you could still love your children just the same as those in the tent, or those in the van, or those in a boat. And so we think over here that we can provide social services to have universal health care, to have educational attainment for all children. And so let me go on about cultural and religious rights, right? We think that that's important for parents to raise their children in whatever religious or cultural background they have. And they can't have that if the state is teaching their children. They can't have that if they're in a group home with hundreds of other kids or dozens of other kids with one parent that's supposed to be parenting them, which is a foster parent, going in and out of different homes, going in and out of different groups, and having, as a POI that Craig said, gangs, because there's other kids from low incomes. So destroying this mother and father in a van, taking them away just because they're low income or they're low educational attainment makes it far worse, because you get thrown into that, but I'll talk about that in a second. So my second point is how foster care is horrible, and that's a good segue, and how this is actually going to ruin children's lives. But before I go on, I'll take questions.
Mr. Speaker, in no way is the government side questioning the ability for people to love their children. What we are questioning, however, is the ability for them to do so, specifically when most homeless people, by most I mean roughly 75%, suffer from either a mental illness or drug addiction.
So, and there's also low-income people that live in an apartment building that suffer from the same diseases, suffer from the same disorders, suffer from the same lack of opportunity to have a job, lack of opportunity. Now, so if those are problems in society, why do we have to disenfranchise and say just because you live in a tent, we think you're a bad parent? And that's what they're doing in this side. They're not saying we're going to come out here and criminalize abuse or criminalize neglect or say that all of these things should have increased crime. But what we're saying over here on the opposition side is that if this is happening in society, which we agree it is, then you need increased health care opportunities for all people so we can actually get everyone healthier. That you need better schools for all people. Low-income people in tents, low-income people in apartments. So let me talk about foster care, right? The U.S. Health and Human Services did a study a couple years ago, and no state foster care passed with a passing grade level. So they all failed when the federal government came in and studied state departments. And there were 16 states that didn't even meet any of the 7 benchmarks that they look at. As we're talking about safety, which they say is somehow, people that live in vans are somehow left safe with their children, but then you throw them in this instance, and then it's even far worse. Even the federal government says that they can't even keep children safe in foster homes because you have dozens of people. So we think you could keep them with their families all together as a cohesive unit, still give them help and opportunity if they have problems, just like we do for low-income people in apartments, then it's a better situation. Let me continue on. So let me give you another example. In Maryland, right, they have 2,700 kids in 330 privately funded groups, and they found massive, massive neglect. And it's the same situation, but it's worse because there's not actually parents there that are trying. And that's what these people are doing. Just because they lost their job and got kicked out of their apartment and had to move into their car, these people are still trying. And so we think if you're going to help anybody, then you need to keep these parents together. And so that brings me to a better way, and that's my point about how we can do better. But before I'll...
Yeah, like his gripe is about like safety and like keeping children safe and what's the best ability. Like the last time I checked, like, yeah, loving your kid is love, but they still haven't shown how that keeps them safer than it would in a foster home where they actually have some sort of shelter.
Right, but some shelter with abuse from other kids that are in the same socio-demographic community, right? So they're saying it's unsafe, that these kids are going to be more violent or less educated. So if you take them and put them with a bunch of other kids in a group home where there's less supervision, then there's more problems, and that's what we're saying. So if you keep them with the loving mom and dad, assuming that there's not abuse, which of course there's abuse, as I've said, in apartment buildings and tents. It's the same situation. It's poverty. That's what happens in poverty, and that's wrong, which is why I think there's a better way, because we can help these people. As I said, if we want to talk about universal health care, we need to get there. We need to cover all people like so many countries in the world does, because if everyone can have health care and everyone can have a good education, then we can have less abuse, as I've said, in tents, and less abuse in apartments. But because this side over here says if you don't live in apartments, if you don't live in a walled-off apartment building or a house, then you don't take care of your kids. They have to prove over here that there's a special burden of harm, because they will give statistics that they're more disadvantaged. But low-income people are more disadvantaged than the rest of society. And that's what they have to prove. They have to prove just because you're in a tent that you're worse off. So we think that there's a better way, and this makes it much worse. Thank you very much.